Welcome to this video. This will be another part, the third part or third episode of this opening focus series, Chess Openings Uncovered. And this time I'll have a look and present an overview of the classical King's Indian main line, which is the following: 1d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight e3, bishop g7, and we got a King's Indian. And by far the most popular line by white is knight f3 and bishop e2, which is the classical variation. This is defined by putting a knight on f3 and a bishop on e2. There are alternatives, of course. White can also play h3, for instance, which is not exactly the classical, but bishop e2 and castles is the main line. Now black plays e5 and castles. Here an important alternative is bishop e3, the Gligorich variation, which is also very popular. And also there's d5, the Petrosian variation, which is a bit of a forgotten line. It's not so popular anymore, but still quite interesting for white. But I'll have a look at the absolute main line, which is castles. Here black, of course, has a multitude of possibilities, but the main move and also the sharpest move is knight c6, which intensifies the pressure on white center. So white cannot ignore this pressure. So he cannot make a nothing move. Let's, for example, just for argument's sake, if white would make a move like h3, which does nothing, then black can come up with this kind of tactic and win a pawn. So white must react here, and he usually goes with d5, knight e7, and this is the absolute main position of the King's Indian. Probably I haven't checked it, but this is certainly within the King's Indian. If you would check for positions after 8 moves with white to move on move 9, this is with absolute certainty the most popular position. And this is in a way understandable, as it is white's most straightforward way to develop. So knight f3, bishop e2, castles, and d5 was not exactly forced, but close to this. So what is happening in this position? The pawn structure is the most important thing here, and it defines the upcoming plans in the middle game. White has got this advanced pawn, and he's got this pawn chain, which defines his space advantage on the queen side. So white has the queen side as the natural place to initiate play and advance. So this often involves the pawn push c5, attacking the d6 pawn, the base of the chain. So c5, sometimes supported by b4, and also there can be attacks based on piece play with knight b5 at some point. So white's natural area of the board is the queen side, of course. And for black it's the king side, as this kind of pawn formation, I get rid of all this stuff. This kind of pawn formation suggests that black's pawn break that he needs to go for, and this is really almost mandatory. It's hard to play this opening without this move. You need to go with f5, attacking white's e4 pawn, and then depending on circumstances, black sometimes even pushes this pawn further and also uses the other pawns. So he advances all his pawns in front of the king, but this isn't really an issue. Black's king is not weak in any way, so you can advance these pawns. And actually here white has quite a number of moves, and all those moves are trying to address the upcoming middle game plans in slightly different ways. The traditional main move here, you must take into account that this position is really only known for about 60 years. I mean, no one played this kind of opening before World War II. It was really introduced with the generation after the war. In Russia there was Geller, Bronstein. We've got Gligorich, he recently died, who also was a huge expert on this opening. And back then the absolute main line was knight e1, and it's still a very important line today. Probably not the main move, but this is often dictated also by fashion. So why would white play this retreat, knight e1? Yeah, it has a very direct idea. This way white prevents black from playing knight h5 and f5. As white, of course, simply, if now knight h5, you can simply win a pawn. And this is not okay for black, just giving away the pawn like that. So black cannot play this active knight move to prepare f5. If he wants to play f5, he needs to move the knight to a more passive square, like e8 or to d7. So this is one idea of this knight move, so that black needs to play a passive knight move. The other idea is that it clears the f-pawn. We can see this in the following line. Let's say black plays knight d7 to prepare f5. So if white would play, let's say knight d3 now, f5, then you have the opportunity to play f3, and so you can support the center. This is also a main reason why the f3 knight is moved in this kind of positions, so that you can give support to your e4 pawn. Of course, the knight, which has been transferred to d3 here, also has other ideas. It can go to f2, for example, which can be a very good square for the knight, because it controls the g4 square. But let's get not ahead of ourselves. So knight e1, knight d7. Here's the major parting of the ways. White can now decide if he wants to play bishop e3, and he should do this exactly now, or if he wants to place the bishop on d2 and go for a different setup. Bishop e3 is the most aggressive move, as it points towards the queen side. The disadvantage of this move is after f5, f3, f4, black wins a tempo. Now g5 or h5, and so black has won a tempo in this fashion with f4, and this has been for a very long time considered to be a really bad variation for white, up to the 70s, I would say. Even Fischer in I'm not quite sure if it, I think it even was in 60 Memorable Games, he wrote that that this attack is worked out to a mate for black, so black delivering mate. Fischer was a King's Indian player. Of course, that's not true. It was a very simplistic way to see it. And it was really Viktor Korchnoi who sort of resurrected this variation and began to play it starting in the 70s and 80s, and he had huge success with this. And his games are absolutely fantastic in this opening. So if you want to take up this without studying Korchnoi's games, it would be rather weird, because he's really the godfather of this setup. So this is very much the essential form of the classical King's Indian, where white is trying to kill black on the queen side, and black is trying to do the exact opposite on the king side, delivering mate. And as mentioned, white has invested a whole move here, putting the bishop on f2. Black has got in f4 with tempo, and even if you consider g4, g3, this can be another tempo on this bishop. So this leads to absolute super sharp play, which can only be recommended for white players who have really got strong nerves in defending the king, because black will get something against the king, but you need to defend accurately. Yeah, in this position, white even has a multitude of possibilities. Korchnoi original innovation was knight b5, which now I think has been diffused by b6. There are also moves like a4, which was Korchnoi's second try. The idea to play a5, sometimes even a6, and also to support knight b5, so that after knight b5, b6, you can immediately play a5. a4 is also an absolute mainline, even nowadays. There's also the interesting move Rook C1, which has been played a lot in recent years. The idea is to even sacrifice a pawn with c5. So if black plays something like this, white will play this very aggressive move. So after d takes, you can even play b4, and it's this kind of position is simply horrible for black. So he needs to take with the knight, and then you play b4, something like this. And you sacrifice the pawn for lots of pressure on the c-file. Probably this is okay for black, but it's not easy at all to play. This has got the advantage that this knight is stranded on a6 and cannot help here on the king side somewhere. White has other options though. He can also play knight d3, and also b4 is not completely out of the picture. So this is the kind of line that you should play if you really think that you can kill black on the queen side, and yeah, that you're a good enough defender to not get mated. As black, of course, yeah, you're running you're pretty much sure that your queen side will fall apart, so you need to get counterplay as quickly as possible. Black has got lots of ideas, and it's really a matter of the exact move orders here. Let's say a4, for example. Black has a multitude of moves. You can go a5. There's even the weird looking move a6 with the idea to cover b5 and then play rook f6, h6, queen e8, queen to h5. And this is super crude, but it's it's dangerous. You can easily win quickly with this kind of attack. Of course, black can also simply ignore all this and get on with his own play. So knight g6, h5, and so on. So it's super complicated. But what I'd like to stress here, that as white, you should only play this if you have strong nerves with defending your king. I had to look at this variation more than one time, and at the end I always decided that I cannot play this because I simply hated to have my king attacked so directly. It's still a very principled way to combat the King's Indian, and for the black players, if you're not comfortable facing such a line, then you shouldn't play this kind of opening. I mean, you're positionally busted on the queen side. You need to be aware of that and play a huge counter attack on the king side. It's super sharp, but this is the nature of this opening. And this is this bishop e3 line is absolutely the sharpest that white can try. It's the quickest way to try to bust the queen side, but it also, as mentioned, runs the risk of a huge counter attack because you spend too much time. White here also has another option, and this is to play over the bishop only to d2 to avoid this tempo gain. This can run as follows. Let's say knight d3, f5, bishop d2, knight f6, attacking e4, f3, and now black plays f4 to close the king side and prepare g5 and g4. So it's a similar pawn structure, but note that white has the bishop here, and he didn't give up a tempo with bishop e3 to f2. So the bishop is more passive here, but you've gained time in a way, so that white is now able to play c5 here. The knight was put on d3 to support this move. Note that in this kind of setup, it's not a good idea to play lots of pawn moves here. This is a common mistake that that players of all kinds of levels make in this position, that they want to make further pawn moves on the queen side. This is really not the way to go. You need to try to infiltrate on the c-file as quickly as possible, and those pawn moves don't really help you so much. You can move your pawns, but only in a position where you're already basically busted black. It's not something that you should do now. Yeah, let's follow what happens. c5, g5, and here for a long time the usual continuation was to take on d6. We should look at this first. Takes, and rook c1. Yeah, and here black has the typical kind of maneuver, knight g6, and if knight b5, black can play rook to f7, covering c7 here from the side, so that white cannot enter. And this is a typical regrouping also. Black will play bishop to f8 even, covering d6, and then rook to g7, supporting the g-pawn push. And here white can play multiple moves. Queen c2 is a possibility, getting this into play again. So white's main idea here is to play on the c-file, and he can also play knight f2 to play against this g4 advance. So the knight on f2 is covering the g4 square. So this knight maneuver here, knight e1 d3, first was designed to support c5, and then drop back to f2 to control g4. Important ideas here also are, let's look at this in another way. This is not the main move. I just want to show the idea. Knight f2 to support g4, and white very often uses the rook here on the third rank to defend the king side, so that after g4 you can take and then swing the rook over. This is also a typical idea. Yeah, this is pretty much the oldest line in the main line, King's Indian. However, in recent years, let's say last 3 or 4 years, there has been a new discovery in these lines, which is rather interesting. The idea is not to take immediately on d6, but to play rook c1 first. The idea is, if black continues like this, knight b5, rook f7, so white simply didn't take yet. Here white has the funny move bishop to a5, simply attacking this pawn, threatening to take on d6. And this is a rather tricky line. I'm not quite sure that if black has already found a great antidote to this. So probably he has, but it's just otherwise people wouldn't play the King's Indian anymore, because black doesn't have so many options before that. Probably needs to play b6, and then it continues. Okay, this is an interesting idea to look at for the white player. In general, this kind of line with bishop d2, I think it can be recommended. It's a bit out of fashion, actually, and this can be a good idea for white to go along those classical lines, as black players have so many other stuff to so much other stuff to look at to prepare something, that this kind of old forgotten line can be a good idea. Black, of course, needs to know his setups here, because this is simply such a principled line that you should know what to do. Yeah, this are the two main branches of the knight e1 line. So the Korchnoi line with bishop e3 and the bishop d2 line. There are some others. I cannot go into every line. One possibility, for example, is this, which looks weird at first sight. This advance of the g pawn, but this is quite interesting. It sort of preempts black's play on the king side. So there are a multitude of minor lines, but those are the two main ideas with knight e1. Another main move, which is similar in nature, but still different, is knight d2. It's similar in one way, that it prevents this knight h5 idea again, and it also overprotects e4. A difference, though, a very important difference, is it blocks this bishop. So it's not exactly a move that speeds up your development. Of course, it's a very close position, so the development is not as essential as in an open position where piece play is dominant. But still, it's a somewhat clumsy-looking move in a way. Still perfectly playable, of course. The idea why white puts the knight exactly on d2 is the idea to put it on c4 later. So if you want to play c5, knight c4, and then attack this base of the chain. This can be shown most directly if black plays something like knight d7. Let's say b4, f5, and then white can even play c5, ignoring the fact that this is protected on c5. It's unprotected on c5. If black would, let's just put it on the board. If black would grab this, this is too much. You get too much pressure in the center. But black would play probably this, and then let's say f3, f4, knight c4. This is what you want to do with white by putting the knight on d2. You want the knight on c4, attacking this pawn. So this is in fact the sharpest way for black to respond to knight d2 by simply ignoring all this and getting ahead with the kingside play. This is a line that in recent years Hikaru Nakamura has played as black more than once, and with quite some success even. It's very risky, as this is basically, I mean, you're simply giving away the queen side, and you know you'll get completely busted on the queen side, and you need to deliver mate. Everything else for black is simply not acceptable. You need to get this attack going. It probably continues something like this. Something like this. And you see that white has a huge build-up on the queen side. So black has really he has to hurry on the king side. It's a super sharp play. If you don't mind the risk involved, then you can go for this. The good thing about this, as from black's point of view, is if you look at this position and you simply, as mentioned, ignore all this and let white play his stuff. If you don't mind this line, then you also have, after b4, which is probably the main move nowadays, you can also simply ignore this, as it simply transposes. White doesn't have anything else really than getting into the kind of line that I just showed. Let's say c5, f5, and white will probably transpose into this. Nakamura even got his positions mostly from 9 b4 and not 9 knight d2. So this would be a way to sort of kill two birds with one stone. But after knight d2, black has besides those ultra aggressive moves, knight e8 is similar in nature, also ignoring the queen side. White has black has a couple of more prophylactic moves. The main move probably is a5, which simply prevents b4 for the time being. And white, yeah, has more than one option. I think a3 is still the main move, where black now can choose mostly between knight to d7 and f5, or he can play bishop to d7, which is more of a defensive move. The idea is also to play a4, block the queen side. And yeah, this is in fact what I played as black when I still played the King's Indian. I always like this very flexible kind of move. It's always funny what the computer gives in this kind of position. If you the computer, of course, if you would have this position in a match game, and the computer would play a human or another engine, it would play out of the opening books. But here Houdini proudly wants to play knight f3, which is complete nonsense. It's funny. Computer still absolutely has no idea about the King's Indian. Okay, and it gives white an advantage, of course. Completely insane. I mean, after knight f3, for example, I just play a4 and have a good position. I mean, black is just better, no question. All right, but just a slight digression. White usually plays a move like b3 here and then prepares b4 slowly. And this is a sort of mixed game. Yeah, it's a little bit of maneuvering. It might get sharper later, but it's not the kind of yeah, gung-ho kingside attacking style which you could get with knight e8, knight d7. Still, black is far more solid. You're not risking to get blown away quickly. So this is more of yeah, let's say more of a sophisticated way to play the King's Indian here with a5. Also possible is c5, which is not bad at all. It simply blocks the c4, c5 idea, but is a bit passive, yeah, admittedly. White very often can get something like this. This kind of position where white is always very slightly better. It's not a huge problem for black, but it is slightly passive. You cannot really get something going on the king side. On any actions with f5, white probably will take. And in the long run, white has ideas like this. Of course, not now. It's double protected even on a5, but you can go here. You can also attack d6 in some way. And white is rather flexible here, how he also handles the king side. So it's slightly better for white. So after knight d2, I think black should think about play a5 and probably bishop d7 for a positional game. Knight d7 is also sharp. It's not as sharp as this line where black ignores all this. If you really don't care about your queen side and just want to hack away, then knight d7 f5 is fine. You should know the risks that you're running, but it certainly leads to very uncompromising play. Yeah, the white player, I also looked at this line for quite some time over the years because I'd like the kind of slower setups with a5 and so on. I mean, this is the kind of position that you can play with both colors, and it's interesting and complicated. Why I didn't play this simply as white is this kind of stuff that Nakamura is playing, where he simply gives away the queen side and attacks on the king side. I always hate it when my king is attacked, so it was never my line. So after this, you need to be aware of knight d7, knight d8. It gets very uncompromising, and it's tough. It will be a very tough game. Very interesting though, playing this as for both sides. So this is knight d2. And yeah, now to the most popular move nowadays, which is b4. Yeah, before the bayonet attack was always a sideline up to the early 90s, really. In the early 90s, there's been a discovery which really put this line into the forefront of chess theory and practice, and this is that after knight h5, which is the main move, even nowadays, after knight h5, white doesn't really need to fear the move knight to f4. Up to this point, it was believed that white must play g3 here to cover this square. But in the early 90s, people recognized that rook e1 is a very interesting move here. The idea being that if black plays knight f4, which is not particularly good even, you can play bishop f1, tucking this bishop away and not allowing black to take it. That in this position, black cannot really play f5, which looks like the normal way to proceed, but it's simply not playable. You can take here, captures, and e5, and this position is very, very problematic for black. White smashes through in the center. He's got a great development, and he will even be able to probably play c5, bishop c4, and all kinds of stuff. This is also in the mix. Yeah, black has a terrible fashion here. Simply not a playable line. So this is the very basic idea of the rook move, that knight f4 isn't really such a great threat here. And this wasn't recognized before, let's say, 1990, 1991. Nowadays, f5 is played here. Knight f4 is, as mentioned, not so great. f5, and now we see one idea of this this whole setup with b4, where this knight hasn't moved, and this is knight to g5. If you don't move the knight to d1 or e1, you even have the chance to jump to g5, and this is a very interesting positional concept. Black now will most likely retreat to f6, and now you have this knight on g5. And what is the knight actually doing there? One main point of this knight is that it at one day will go to e6, and it will get taken, and white will have a pawn on e6, which is often a very double-edged affair to have such a pawn. It can be very strong there, but it can also easily get lost, as black can attack it with queen c8 to e6. Let's just put something on the board. Let's say I'll go bishop f3 here. If black would play h6, white goes here. And this is quite interesting. White now intends to take on f5 to attack the b7 pawn. So black must react to this. He can play something like this, for example, after which white would go b5. So this is a very, very interesting positional struggle here in the center. This pawn can get lost at some point, but white has very active pieces. This bishop at the moment is not doing more than look at its own pawn, but it can always take at the right moment. White also has bishop a3 as a possibility to attack the d6 pawn, can intensify the pressure here. So this is an interesting active position for white. The difference between this kind of setup to knight d2 or knight e1 is that the play is mainly happening in the center. The center is sometimes really opening up, and it's not a strict race situation. In the bishop e1, knight e1 or knight d2 line, sometimes it's really a kind of race where white puts everything on the queen side and tries to win the game there, and black pushes his king side. Here it is a much more complicated and not so straightforward play. This is just one possible line. There are others. White can also go here, which had been played often, and black even returns to h5 here. And it continues for quite a while. In fact, the latest kind of fashion is introduced by Kramnik, who is basically the world's #1 expert in this line, is to play g3, the old move, and then after f5, knight g5, knight f6 to play bishop f3. This is a new idea, or let's say, it's not new, but it has been played in 1 or 2 games from the 90s. But the idea is it's similar to the Rook E1 setup, not so now. But white has played g3, and Kramnik recently won a very nice game with this line against Grishuk in the I'm not quite sure, Tar Memorial. I think it was the Tar Memorial. He won a very nice game with this line, and this is similar, but also slightly different. G3, of course, allows white to drop back the bishop at some point, and the rook on f1 still protects f2. But in general, it's the same concept as shown before. This knight g5 e6 basically kills all black's play on the king side. Black will not have an automatic attack there, and play will happen more in the center, which will open up. After b4, instead of knight h5, black also has another continuation, which is playable. This is a5, after which white responds by taking or playing bishop a3, which even can lead to the same kind of position. Usually it continues in this way: b6, a4, and now black can go I think any place with a knight as has been played, something like this. So black has invested a bit of time with a5 and b6 to slow down white's play on the queen side, and now will intends to play f5 later. I think this line, this a5 line in general, nowadays has the reputation to be a little bit better for white, but it's still fairly solid for black. So it can be an idea to play like this if you're black, if you want to avoid the main path with knight h5. And as mentioned when I explained a bit about knight d2, after b4, black can also ignore all this and continue his play. This kind of, the Nakamura variation, so to say, which could arise like this also after 9b4. So this is the way for black that I can recommend to play if you don't mind the huge risk, but also you simply need to invest less time, as you can play this line against b4 and knight d2. So are there other moves here? Yeah, there are. All kinds of stuff has been tried, but they're not so theoretically important. Bishop g5 has been played a couple of times, after which black he has got more than one idea. I always like to play h6, takes, and then it often continues like this, b4. And I always liked this idea: knight g8, bishop e7 and f5, and knight f6 back. Quite a funny regrouping. So let's just put it on the board, something like this. The white often plays something like this, and now f5 and knight to f6, not to e6. Oops, oh, I didn't want to do that. It's funny. f5. Yeah, knight f6. That's what I meant. Bishop g5. Yeah, this is a rare line, which frankly speaking doesn't lead to much. And there have been some really offbeat tries here. King h1 is one. One move which has been tried by Bent Larsen, always an inventive thinker. Yeah, it's not so clear what this move is doing really. One idea can be to play g4 after some preparation, and also knight g1 can be an idea. So not knight e1 d2, but to g1. Yeah, it is playable. It's not a bad move, but you cannot really expect to get anything great here. Also, h4 has been a4 has been tried quite a bit, and it's not so bad. One idea is at some point to play rook a3 using the third rank. So these kind of moves, yeah, you should study briefly if you play this as black, but you get them really rarely. The three moves, knight d2, knight e1, and b4, are really the moves that you get in more than 90% of the time. So yeah, quick overview. If you are white, you need to be aware that in all lines here, you will get attacked on your king, and you need good defensive skills and nerves to play those kind of position. In comparison, the b4 line is the line where this kind of attacks on your king happens yeah, with the least frequency, so to say, as only this knight d7 is really so uncompromising, or knight e8, and then you don't have much choice. You need to push here. If you play knight e1, bishop e3, oops, no, this was too much. Oh, I'm sorry, if you play this one and bishop e3, you need to be aware that you will be mated quite often, but win often on the queen side, so it's very risky. The knight e1, bishop d2, I think can be recommended to many players. It's still a bit risky, as black will get the attack, but it's fairly solid. With knight d3 to f2, you have good defensive possibilities, and you're always better on the queen side. And I hit the wrong button. I'm sorry, I need to put this on the board again quickly. Yeah, then knight d2. Yeah, this is a bit of a middle of the road approach. It's pretty interesting, leading to a positional fight, but still after knight d7, knight d8, you will get get the race positions. It's nothing you can do. So all in all, this classical main line is a good choice for players on the white side who believe in their positional advantages and are not afraid of this attack. And black, of course, yeah, you're playing the King's Indian. You know that you run a huge strategical risk on the queen side. Very often you will, yeah, simply get torn apart there, but you will have those dynamic counter-attacking possibilities against the king, and very often you'll win memorable games with checkmates. And you simply need to be aware this is not in any way a playable opening. If you want, if you need a draw or want some solid position or whatever, it's simply the most uncompromising fight you can think of. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this overview. I really only touched the surface here, as this is a very complicated line and can easily be explored over hundreds of pages if you look at this in a book. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this overview, and I'll be back soon with new videos in this series, but also on other subjects.